In this lecture, we're going to take a look at arthropods and the role that arthropods play as vectors of diseases, both as biological and as mechanical vectors for disease. So here we go. The phylum Arthropoda is the largest phylum in the animal kingdom. As many as 80% of the species on the earth are arthropods. Well, as many as 80% of the animals on the earth are arthropods. They have segmented bodies with a jointed exoskeleton made of chitin, and inside of that exoskeleton, muscles are attached to it, and so they can move their jointed legs, their jointed appendages, with the muscles that they have. They have a fully lined body cavity, so much like the which group? Actually, I think I'm trying to remember if there was another group that we looked at that had a true coelom. But if you look at them in cross-section, so here, for some reason, there we go. All right, so now I've connected it. If we take a slice through their body, you would see that there's an external skin layer, and then inside, or lining that skin, there's a muscle layer, and then here surrounding their gut is another muscle layer. And then there's a body cavity that the organs are found in, and that is their true coelom. They've got a relatively small brain composed of a ganglion of cell bodies of their neurons, and a very extensive network of nerves, and so lots of behaviors that are associated with arthropods. Their gas exchange, they don't have lungs, but they do have this network of internal, very thin-walled tubes that come out to a structure called a spiracle at the body's surface, and this network is what allows gas exchange. And so they can, as they move their bodies, then the muscles kind of pump these thin-walled tubes, and the movement of organs inside pump these thin-walled tubes, and so air is kind of pumped in and out in this way. That's among the terrestrial species. Those that live in saltwater or freshwater generally have gills. They do show separate sexes, so males and females, and the females generally produce eggs, and many of them act as parasites on animals and plants. So a lot of parasitic groups in this phylum. When we think of the ones that are parasitic among humans and other mammals, then ticks and mites certainly come to mind. And then the ones that can be dangerous or can cause issues for humans include spiders and scorpions. So among the arachnids, so these are the arachnids, this group of spiders, scorpions, ticks, and mites, they have two major body regions. So they have a cephalothorax, which includes the segments that are associated with the head and with the body movement. That's the cephalothorax, so head and thorax kind of fused together. And then they have the abdominal segments, and if you look at this mite, you can kind of make out its segmentedness. So I'll try to, for some reason, my pen's not working today. I think I need to get some new batteries for it. But let's see if I can, you can see the arrows here. So like there would be one segment, it looks like. Here's the next segment. Here's another segment. On that close-up view of the mite. So the abdomen is where we find the digestive and reproductive organs. Spider bites and scorpion stings can cause local inflammation, and depending on the kind of toxin that's in their bite, it can also cause necrosis of tissues, so death of tissues, and can even spread systemically. So some spiders have a very, very toxic bite. Ticks and mites, they can act as external parasites. They feed on the blood and other body fluids as they bite and suck those body fluids. And they even then, because they're biting and sucking and moving fluids around from their mouths, or even carrying fluids from one organism to another, then they can serve as vectors for disease. And so some of the diseases that ticks carry include Lyme disease, which is caused by a microbe called Borrelia burgdorferi, Borrelia burgdorferi, and Rocky Mountain spotted fever, which is caused by a Rickettsia type of bacteria. And mites can also transmit Rickettsia, causing a fever, a disease called scrub typhus, and another one called Q fever. So we see ticks and mites serving as vectors for disease. Another group of parasitic arthropods are the insects, and the ones that we're concerned with here in microbiology include body lice and pubic lice, fleas, flies, mosquitoes, bed bugs, and the reduviid bugs. So I'll show you a picture of a reduviid bug in a little bit. They are not disease causers here in North America, but in South America, especially in tropical areas, we see reduviid bugs. They have three body locations. There's a head, and the head is not fused with the thorax. The head has the ganglion and lots of sensory organs, the thorax with its legs and wings, and the abdomen, which has a digestive and reproductive function. So here's the head of this fly. The thorax is where the legs are attached and where the wings are attached. And then behind the thorax here is the abdomen. So on the flea head, here's the thorax, right here where the legs are attached, and then here's the abdomen. They have mouth parts that are able to pierce the skin and suck the blood, or they can slice skin. So if you think about like a horsefly that will come up and slice your skin, and then they have these lapping mouth parts that are able to cause blood to adhere to them, and then they can kind of suck the blood from these lapping mouth parts. And they serve as vectors for lots of different diseases, some of which are super deadly. So the body louse, for instance, carries the bacteria that cause typhus, that cause trench fever and relapsing fever. The fleas transmit bubonic plague, which killed, at one time, back in the Middle Ages, killed as much as a third of all the humans on the earth. And the common housefly, which acts as a mechanical vector, as its legs and its mouth parts carry the pathogens, especially those that are found in fecal material. And so as they, kind of lap and munch on the food that they can find in feces, then they pick up whatever bacteria might be, or other disease-causing particles that might be found in that fecal material. We're still talking here about insects. Many of them are vectors for disease, as I mentioned. Flies can carry the agents that cause river blindness, leishmaniasis, African sleeping sickness, and lots more. So these are all, African sleeping sickness is a protist disease. Leishmaniasis is bacterial. River blindness, I'm not sure whether that's viral or bacterial. Mosquitoes, we know, can carry agents that cause Eastern equine encephalitis. So that was a big deal here in North Carolina. I'm trying to think, that was in the early teens, 2010, 2011. We were seeing eastern equine encephalitis, especially down in the Piedmont areas of North Carolina. The Zika virus that we've heard so much about lately, dengue and yellow fever, those are more tropical diseases, and malaria, again, a subtropical and tropical disease. There are the reduviid bugs, and here is a reduviid bug sitting next to that penny, and they carry Chagas disease, which is a leading cause of some of cardiovascular disorders that occur in people who live in Central and South America. And then here's the bed bug that we hear so much about, this guy right here, that many hotels and those kinds of places where people are traveling in and out, in apartments, bed bugs have showed some real problems. As they bite and suck human blood, then they can cause dermatitis, and I think in the kind of gross slideshow that I put together, there's a person with some pretty nasty looking bed bug bites across their back. Oh, that's a hard one. I dare you to say bed bug bites 3 times very, very fast. And they can even spread the hepatitis viruses that cause such liver complications. And then the third group of arthropods that can act as either vectors or parasites are the crustaceans. These include the crabs, the shrimp, I'm trying to think of other common crustaceans, the pill bugs that we see underneath rocks and stuff in moist soils on land are all crustaceans. The ones that can be either vectors or parasites include crayfish, or can harbor parasites, include crayfish or crawdads, crabs, and these small planktonic sort of shrimp-like organisms called copepods. So here is an example, copepod. This one's a free living, but there are some that either act as vectors for disease or that can be parasites of other animals themselves. I don't know of any copepod parasites in humans. Crustaceans are found in freshwater, saltwater, and even then, as I mentioned, with the pill bugs, there are a few terrestrial species. And primarily their role in parasitism is to serve as intermediate hosts for parasites. So there's copepods are the primary transmitter for guinea worms, so the roundworm parasite, the one that causes those really, really painful blisters where the worm emerges from the blister. And crayfish are an intermediate parasite for flukes. And so when we think about the lung flukes, it's crawdads in shallow waters, fresh waters that act as one of the intermediate parasites, along with the snail that is an intermediate parasite.